A few weeks ago, I made a video saying that I need a lawyer, but I didn't really say why. So, in this video, I'm going to share more details about the matter that I'm facing. And perhaps you can share with me your view, or you could share this video with someone that can help. I really want to make this video because I want to explain this calmly and clearly because this isn't just my situation. It's honestly something that happens to tenants across South Africa every single day. Okay, let's begin. In September 2023, I moved into a room in Sunningdale, Cape Town. I was one of two tenants sharing that house, with the third being a landlord. I was under the impression that I'm paying for privacy, freedom, and agency, access to my own private space, a bedroom, as well as a shared bathroom. While I did have access to the rest of the house, the space that I made most use of was the kitchen and very rarely visited any of the other common areas. Before I moved in, I paid 10,000 Rand upfront. I paid 5,000 Rand for the deposit and I paid 5,000 Rand for the first month's rent. I have all the bank statements, proof of payments, and WhatsApps as evidence of my payments. You see, I'd also just moved from Delft. And so I was looking for a fresh start, and that for me was meant to be my exploration into the suburbs and a chance for something fresh and something new. I was very, very excited to move out from the Cape Flats, and I was so much more excited to be living in the suburbs, which, by the way, is one of the places that I've always dreamed of living. It was also the start of a new job. So mentally, I was preoccupied with the requirements of that job and what would be needed from me in this new step in my career. And for the first few days, everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Within 4 days of moving in, things shifted drastically. I began noticing narcissistic tendencies in the landlord, a desire to dominate and control, controlling behavior, emotional volatility, suppression of my privacy, suppression of my freedom and my agency, and boundary violations. It was a kind of dynamic that told me if I keep engaging, this is going to escalate. So I did what someone who's aware with narcissistic behaviors does. I withdrew my attention and my energy. I stopped communicating entirely in person. I avoided this person wherever in the household they were. I very rarely came out of my room. I spent most time in my room, and communications were limited to very rare communications over email, specifically having to do with essential matters. So by day 4, I made a decision. I stopped all in-person communication. From that day onwards, for the entire 4 weeks that I lived there, we communicated only through email and only when absolutely necessary. I wanted peace, distance, and no further involvement beyond what the lease required. And I have all the communications to show this. Then, on the last day of the lease, things got worse. The landlord furiously knocked on my door and demanded that I leave by 5 p.m. I was behind a closed door, and in a moment of sensing that aggression, I responded, "Fuck off." Because I knew I was going. I knew that the place that I was going to next was the space for my peace. I knew that I was done with that place. I did not need an aggressive knock on my door demanding I leave. I knew I was going. Immediately at that point, the landlord's boyfriend entered my room without consent. I felt so violated in that moment. The Rental Housing Act lists regulations against the landlord entering the tenant space without consent. So, of course, I was shaken. I was inside the room. The landlord's boyfriend barged into the room, and I felt violated. I was shaken. Mentally and emotionally, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. It caused me enough distress that I started packing immediately. My safety and my peace outweigh everything else. So I started packing, and by the time I'd left, the landlord and the boyfriend were not around. I did my best to secure the premises, leaving the key inside for the landlord to find, and I truly trusted that it was over. All the pain, the hardship and the challenge that I'd faced over those 4 weeks of believing that this was finally my peaceful time, it was finally over, and I was going to greener pastures. That is something I was really looking forward to, moving on and getting my deposit back. Because I knew that there were no defects and there were no damages when it came to the rental property. So after I left, a couple hours later, I received an email from the landlord saying that when she arrived home, her bedroom door was open, she found her clothes on the floor, her sentimental jewelry was missing, and she's going to be opening a case at the police station. So, of course, me knowing that I want nothing to do with this person, I'm finding it very strange that now there's an insinuation that I will take something to be further involved with them. This person is making false criminal accusations. That for me was serious. It's been 2 years since then. No evidence has been provided, no case was opened. I can tell very clearly that this person is lying. Furthermore, since then, the landlord has used that as an excuse to unlawfully withhold my 5,000 Rand deposit. I have not been refunded the deposit. It's been 2 years since then. Let me remind you, no evidence was provided of any theft, of any break-in, of any burglary. No case was opened, no investigation was done. That tells me this person doesn't have any evidence of the claims that they're making, but they continue to stand behind their claims, hoping that I don't stand up for myself. Well, I am. I'm doing that right now. If there were any deductions to be made from the deposit, that would have been done in an outgoing inspection. By the way, my presence was not necessary for the outgoing inspection to be done. Both the Rental Housing Act and the lease say that within 7 days of vacating, the outgoing inspection must be done, and any type of itemized invoice, receipts, and so on must be shared with the tenant to justify any types of deductions. None of that occurred. If there's no inspection, the landlord must return the full deposit. That's what the Rental Housing Act says. In my case, there was no outgoing inspection. There was no incoming inspection. There was no itemized invoice. There was no defects list. There was no receipts provided. There was no evidence provided for any of the false claims made. There were no damages. And in my view, which I have the evidence for, there is absolutely no lawful reason to make any deductions from that deposit other than perhaps a small cleaning fee. Furthermore, when I review our communications, I see from the very beginning the landlord always threatening to make deductions even before we had reached the end of the month. Why? Because I always requested further information. Hey, when I leave, will I get my deposit back? Hey, if I go now at day 4, will I get my deposit back? Should I stay until the end of the month? Will I get my deposit back? In response to each of those communications, I always was prefaced, well, I'm going to deduct anything that I need to deduct. And what I saw from those email communications was that all throughout that time, whenever I inquired on whether that deposit would be returned, she would always talk about deductions that she would potentially make. And that kind of showed me that this was a landlord that was plotting and scheming on how to take that money from the very beginning. And after I left, my speculations were confirmed that she made up an entirely false allegation, no evidence, no case, and still to this day, 2 years later, refuses to return my 5,000 Rand deposit. So, of course, after I left that space, the first thing that I did was to approach the Rental Housing Tribunal to open a case. And I did that at the end of September 2023. But as I mentioned, the mental and emotional distress of having lived in that space over those 4 weeks, coupled with me having started a new job, coupled with me moving into my Cape Town dream apartment, all created this space whereby I didn't really feel like I had the capacity to handle that complaint at the time. And so I closed that with the Rental Housing Tribunal at that point. Fast forward to a few weeks ago when I reopened that complaint with the Rental Housing Tribunal, which then led to a mediation. But within that mediation at the Rental Housing Tribunal, what I saw was kind of unfairness and not really impartial behavior happening in that mediation. That even with no case and no evidence, both the case officer and the mediator were taking this person's claim seriously. And in some instances, the mediator, when I was presenting the act, when I was presenting the facts, when I was presenting the evidence, the mediator continued to say, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. And at one point, even accused me of acting like a child. I was not acting like a child. I was presenting facts, I was presenting evidence, and I was presenting references to the Rental Housing Act and the lease to show that the deposit is being unlawfully withheld. But that didn't appear to matter with the Rental Housing Tribunal. So, because of the allegations, even though unfounded, baseless allegations that this person was making, the Rental Housing Tribunal closed the case. These types of allegations are very serious. To be accused of criminal activity is a huge deal. So, after leaving, after being falsely accused of theft for the past 2 years, that has been the thing that this person is standing behind and using as an excuse to unlawfully withhold this deposit. But here's where the contradictions begin. After I left, she sent an email saying she returned home to find her bedroom door open, clothes scattered across the floor, and jewelry missing. She said at that point that she was going to open a case. I responded that I secured the property to the best of my behavior, left the key in a place that it was easily accessible, and have no knowledge of any of those events because I really have nothing to do with what she's claiming. I also mentioned in that email that I would comply with any type of investigation, and even to this day, no case has been opened, no investigation has been done, no evidence has been provided. However, in mediation a few weeks ago, she never mentioned clothes. She now mentions 2 TVs were missing in addition to the jewelry. By the way, I've not owned a TV, nor do I have desire for TVs. Again, no case opened, no evidence, no consistency, nothing aligns. And here's the thing, tenants deal with this type of bullshit all the time from landlords, and very often don't have the resources or the power to stand up to these landlords, and they end up getting trampled on. Honestly, and this is important context, as someone who consciously avoided the landlord since day 4, as someone who refused in person interaction the entire time I lived there, the idea that I would take anything from her or do anything that further entangles me with her is entirely illogical and irrational. It does not align with my behavior, my boundaries, or documented reality. So, this is the pattern that I hope you can see. Narcissistic tendencies, which made me withdraw and stonewall from day 4. No income inspection, no outgoing inspection, no damages, no legal basis for deductions, no itemized invoice, no receipts provided, no evidence provided, no photographic evidence of any of the claims made. Contradictory theft allegations, story not aligning. And so, in summary, the deposit is withheld illegally and continues to be withheld illegally until this day. And again, this happens all the time to tenants in South Africa, especially young professionals, students, and people renting rooms in shared homes. Many don't know their rights, many aren't familiar with the Rental Housing Act. Furthermore, many can't afford legal representation. Many just walk away from their deposits because the fight feels bigger than them. I'm not here to shame anyone or expose private information. What I'm here to do is to tell my story about the unlawful and illegal withholding of my deposit, to highlight a systemic problem using only what's documented for which I have the evidence, and to ask for help to navigate the legal process properly. So, if you're a lawyer, or you know someone that specializes in rental disputes, civil matters, or rental housing tribunal cases, I'm asking for either pro bono support or a free consultation. Just guidance on how to proceed correctly and fairly, noting that I am currently in Joburg and this matter did occur in Cape Town. I have all the evidence. I have the proof of payments of the deposits. I have all of the WhatsApp communications. I have all of the email communications. I have the lease and so much more. This isn't about drama. This is about rights, this is about safety, and this is about making sure that landlords, especially in shared home setups, do not believe that they can suppress the agency, the privacy, and the freedom of the tenant. This is also to make sure that landlords stop abusing the power imbalance, stop breaking the law, and assuming that tenants won't fight back. There are laws in place to protect tenants. And when a landlord refuses to align with the law, the tenant must approach the relevant bodies to ensure that they get their deposit back. That is why there is a Rental Housing Act, to ensure that things like this are straightened out, clarified, and that deposits are not withheld unlawfully. So if you're a lawyer willing to assist me, please DM me. And if you've gone through something similar, please share your experience in the comments. Let's bring awareness to this because honestly, this feels like it's bigger than me. So, yeah, I still need a lawyer for justice, for accountability, and for making the rental space safer for everyone. And that is my story.